Hello, namaste. This is Tim Halloran. I'm an astrologer here in Savannah, Georgia. This is a weekly astrological forecast. I put this video on YouTube once a week, and you can help support future videos by purchasing a reading from me at the link below. We're into our second week of February. Today is Wednesday the 11th. And the energy is pretty weird. Yeah, we have a lot of shifting going around. We have a lot of this unsettling feeling. Because today we have Mercury turning direct. And when Mercury turns direct, that means that it's in the middle of shifting. So Mercury is stationary, not moving right now, has been retrograde for the last month, and now we are shifting back forward in time. But we always have to leave at least a week for Mercury to come out of its shadow phase. There can be this wobbliness, there can be this kind of confusing, being stuck in the past and the future. We also have our half moon today. It's the fourth quarter square, so we have one more week of this last lunar cycle. Okay, and this last lunar cycle, a week ago we had the full moon in Leo, we had the sun in Aquarius. We have a lot to do with this Leo-Aquarius polarity. And what this polarity has to do with is the collective, the whole versus the individual, union and separation, yes? How we as individuals, as completely unique spirit souls, fit into the organization, the collective, the world. And we've had Mercury going retrograde through the sign of Aquarius, which is this highly interconnected, desiring to be in communion with other beings, desiring to form community and group consciousness. And simultaneously, we have Jupiter going retrograde through Leo. We had the last full moon in Leo, highlighting our individual and our identity that is totally unique to us and separate from every other identity out there. And this can be sometimes difficult when we are trying to interact with other people, when we're working with relationships, when we're dealing with our friends, our beloveds. It's not all fun and games. As we know, in love there is pain, there is separation. There is this desire to be super close, and there is simultaneously always going to be an aspect of ourself that is separate. And that is called our individuality. That is our personality. And we are on this quest, this mission, that is really to accept and integrate our own individuality, our spiritual nature that does not change. So a lot of what I see going on this week in the middle of this shiftiness, we've got Mars and Venus still holding hands, moving through the final, third of Pisces. It's this very deep, just having to let go, just having to surrender to what is. And we don't have a lot going on with the personal planets this week, but we do have quite a few asteroid transits going on. Yesterday we had Vesta in exact opposition to Juno. Tomorrow we have Ceres in square to Uranus, and then Ceres is going to align with the Pluto-Uranus square that we have forming through this next month. Still a very highly transformative time. We're still in this kind of early part of the year of being born, and this year is very much about being born. Born into a greater sense of our own identity. That way we can go out there, be reassured, and do what our spiritual work is. So some of these asteroids, when interacting with other people, this last whole moon cycle, there's been possibility for friction, for conflicts with other people, because we've had unique identities with totally unique experiences coming from their past, interacting with other identities that are totally unique, coming from totally unique experiences of their past. And there are differences and there are similarities there, and that's what causes all of these chemical reactions, this attraction, this repulsion that we are all learning and growing from. And it can be conflicting sometimes. With Vesta opposite to Juno, we can notice a conflict between emotional and relationship needs. Like, I want to feel close, and then when I feel close, I feel like I'm sacrificing a part of myself. With Ceres square to Uranus, it's like our nurturing experiences can be very erratic. Like, we don't feel like we're totally being included. Like, we don't feel like we're totally on the same page, that we're not getting nurtured, And it's like, how do we find this balance? How can we embody our identity and simultaneously be involved in the world and not feel hurt, not feel bruised? And this is really what our whole life is about, yes, because what we're talking about here is how do we integrate who we are and not take it personally and not fight against who we actually are. And what I'm going to be saying is that all of this transformation that we're going through, and we've been in a very intense period of transformation that began in 2012. We've had 6, 7 Uranus square to Pluto's, and the final one is going to be next month. Then comes Aries time, the spring equinox, which is oftentimes this time of being born forward. At the end of summer, Saturn moves into Sagittarius for the next 2.5 years. It's like we are really getting forward, stepping into where all this transformation has been taking us. And what is this transformation taking us into? What is all of this change taking us into? It is taking us into accepting and integrating the part of ourself that is not changing. That I'm going to say is our spiritual mission, our purpose for being here. And we can't change that because we all come here for a purpose, for a mission. There is meaning to our life. So everything is karma. The birth chart, the transits are karma. Karma is the same as your deep story and the progression of your realization and stepping into greater and greater levels of truth. Karma is not a right versus wrong, an auspicious versus inauspicious, punishment and reward. Karma is the rich and flavorful story that is taking us into our depth. And there is karma that we can change, and there is karma that we cannot change. And the karma that we cannot change is there specifically to take us into our deepest soul truth. So for example, there are parts of ourselves that make us individual, that are totally brought about through unique experiences that are unique to us and not the same to everybody else. And sometimes this pain of separation can make us feel hurt and we can take it personally. So for example, let's say that a man is born into a family and the father leaves at age 1. Okay, this man has a loaded 12th house. They've got the sun in the 12th house, Saturn in the 12th house, etc. And the 12th house has been known for many centuries as the house of self-undoing, sacrifice, sorrows, and that can be taken very personally, yes? This man grows up almost certainly to be an introvert. They have no masculine, extroverted identity on which to base their own understanding of masculinity. So instead, they are very introverted, they feel discluded, they feel separate from their friends and their family. And this can seem like a tremendously painful situation, and this is also a situation that cannot be changed. This person cannot go back in time and bring their father back, change their early childhood experiences, change their introverted nature. This is a part of who they are. But there are 2 ways that we can go about this. We can go about trying to reject this part of ourselves, trying to deny this part of ourselves, trying to suppress this part of ourselves. Sometimes we'll see the introverted male in this culture going out with their friends to the loud bars, going out to the football games, to try and be included with these other individuals that have not gone through the experiences, that do not have the same identity as this person. And so what's going to happen in the attempt to try to be included, to try and be involved in the bar, to try involved in the football game, is they're going to be in a tremendous amount of suffering. They're going to feel awkward and strange, but they feel like that's what they have to do to feel included. So what they actually end up doing is sacrifice their own identity, deny their own identity, instead of embrace that identity, although it may be painful in its own respects. Because in my own understanding, every single painful, tragic experience or feeling, there is always some gift, talent, goal there. And it is that gift or talent or goal that is coming from the spiritual personality, yes. So if that person, instead of denying themselves, embraced their own introverted nature and got into it and accepted it and started to write poetry, they might understand that all of this 12th house, feeling separate and introverted, and this sorrow and this pain from the lack of the father, etc., etc., simultaneously brings them the profound gift of getting really deep emotionally and being able to write poetry that can truly touch other people's hearts in a way that those people's hearts rarely get touched. Now that is a profound gift there that would never be realized if that person throughout their life tried to escape or deny their own nature. Okay? That gives them simultaneously this connection to this mystical, introverted reality that not everybody has in touch with, okay? So what we're talking about here is that there are parts of our spiritual nature that cannot be changed, and we come into this lifetime to experience these things that we cannot change in order to get into this spiritual purpose, in order to rekindle the flame of passion that gives us the sense of drive and ambition to do our spiritual work in the world. So another example I might give, a female being born into a quote-unquote big-boned body, yes, quote-unquote overweight, and you're born in America, you're born into a culture where you have pop stars, porn stars, magazines that only depict one body type as being the quote-unquote beautiful body type. Now, no matter how much liposuction, plastic surgery, weight watching this person does, you are not fundamentally going to be able to change that particular body type into the particular body type that the culture sees as being best and preferred. So although that person may try to deny that part of ourselves, try to deny that part of their individuality, they cannot fundamentally escape the fact that that's always going to be a part of their individuality that keeps them separate, and that can bring up pain, that can bring up feelings of isolation, not being included, yes, and we each experience these things in highly personal, unique ways. It is part of being an individual, is you will experience pain of separation between you and other people. However, this is simultaneously a part of your spiritual personality and your spirit nature. Now some of you might be thinking, okay, but an overweight body is a body, that's not the spirit soul. That's not who that personality eternally is in the spiritual realm, which is true. However, why would a spiritual soul want to incarnate in a quote-unquote overweight body in a culture that adheres to the quote-unquote beautiful body that's only a very skinny person? Why would someone want to take that body? For a spiritual reason. A person would want to take on that body in order to reintroduce the culture to other types of bodies, to reintroduce the culture to how much feminine females are being suppressed by body image, to reintroduce the culture to feminine nurturance, motherly, matriarchal understanding. These are all spiritual reasons why that person might feel separate and might even feel condemned by that pain of separation that goes hand in hand with their individuality, that will, if they can get into that painful separation, they will discover their passions, their gifts to give to the world. Out of that which cannot change comes the spiritual nature. Everything else that is changing is to align yourself with that which cannot change, which is your spiritual nature. So let's say that the quote-unquote overweight woman really dislikes herself, hates herself, thinks of herself as inferior all the time. I can't change my body, I can't change my body, and it's just always stuck on that. Something needs to change. That's not what can be changed. What can change is a change of attitude. And that might be one of the greatest things that we are shifting here collectively, is we're all shifting our attitudes. We're shifting our attitude and our appreciation of ourselves, of what makes us different, of what makes us separate. Instead of trying to deny the parts of ourselves that we cannot change that make ourselves separate, what if we could change our attitude in order to appreciate those things for the gifts and the goodness and the talents that those things inherently do give us? Because there's no way we can go through any kind of tragic, painful situation without there being some type of learning, some type of bestowal of goodness, of healing, compassionate potential. That overweight woman can go out there and reach out all the other tens of thousands of overweight women that are out there suffering from the same thing, and she can become a beacon of healing, of goodness, of spreading love and warmth and nurturing to the world that she otherwise would not be capable of doing if she were born into a skinny woman's body, in which case she could not have compassion or empathy to the woman who is in the overweight body. Okay? So there is reasons for all of these things, even if we cannot change them. But for what we can change, what we are changing is to best allow us to integrate the part of ourself that cannot change, which is the part of ourself that is the spiritual personality, the spiritual mission, the work that we came here to do that is spiritual. And until we align and integrate and start doing that work, we will not be satisfied. Man trying to be included with his friends at the football game in the loud bars is going to live in suffering so long as he keeps himself in those situations that is really a form of self-denial and self-suppression. So we can't sacrifice ourselves. We can't suppress ourselves, because that's not doing our spiritual work, and we will remain unsatisfied. So we're trying to find a way to do our spiritual work, and that's going to be totally unique to us. So, as far as being included all the time with everybody and everything, you know, this is like a very common thing that we all feel. It's not always the most practical thing, because there will always be things that make you unique, different, separate. And that is your gift that you have to give back to the collective. So long as we're focused on everything being the same, everything being fair, everything being included and all-embracive and everything, you know, there has to be a part of this understanding of love that is the understanding that the pain of separation is there, and that pain of separation is beautiful, that will take you into your deepest spiritual depth. It's not something we should try to run away from. It's actually something that's going to open us to the deepest possibility of our spiritual nature. That is so inconceivable that once you get there, suffering, pain, pleasure, all gets tossed out the window, because it's all so beautiful. It's all taking us into our spiritual nature. So we have another new moon next week, next Wednesday. This is actually technically the second new moon to fall into the sign of Aquarius. It's really in the last minute of Aquarius. It's really on the Aquarius-Pisces cusp. 0 degrees of Pisces. So a month ago, we had a new moon that was on the Aquarius-Capricorn cusp, wanting to establish concrete community, wanting to feel concrete foundation, that there are people out there that have our back, and we want to establish that. This next new moon and this next new month is a little more far out than that. It's more establishing a spiritual identity, a spiritual community, a community that is going to bridge us and everybody on the deepest levels of spiritual understanding, that gets a lot less conceptual, a lot less conceivable. It starts getting a lot more far out, a lot more leading one into unconditional love. Stop seeing things black and white, right or wrong. There's much more of a letting go, of a going with the flow. Surrendering to our life. Surrendering to everything that makes us different. Surrendering to these experiences that we cannot change will be taking us into this rebirth that is giving us a very good sense of our spiritual identity. And your spiritual identity is not going to be the same as anybody else's out there. So we need to be reaffirmed. That's why we have these experiences redundantly. We experience something that keeps us separate again and again and again and again, until we embrace that as a quality of ourself. And then simultaneously start distributing that quality as a spiritual gift. And this is what everything is kind of taking us into, I see, this next month. High transformation period. Everything is shifting around, and simultaneously everything that's shifting around is getting us to embrace the part of ourself that is not changing. And that's the part of yourself that really just wants to get out there, express itself, make its voice known, send ripples of vibration throughout the entire world, transforming everything else. Yes. So, there's a lot of transformation going on in this lifetime, this particular time here on Earth. We're on the very cusp of the age of Aquarius, and so there's all this, you know, we want to be free, we want to do all these things, you know, there's this sexual revolution, you know, it's like all of these new freedoms keep coming, and it's like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I don't want to be oppressed by anything, I don't want to have to do anything in particular, I want to be totally free and liberated, is a major drive of this force, but that, of this time. But that drive is simultaneously coming out of the deeper spiritual movement, and the spiritual movement is not necessarily about being completely free all the time. There are aspects that you don't have choices about. And as you get deeper and deeper into spiritual reality, you get less and less choices, because it doesn't become about you doing whatever you want and being completely liberated and being completely free. It turns into love. And love is choiceless. If you love somebody and they die, you don't choose whether your heart breaks. Your heart breaks. If you love somebody and they do something painful, your heart breaks. So it actually becomes more and more of a surrendering into what you cannot choose, rather than just doing whatever the hell you want. Yeah. So that's something that we need to be aware of this week, because, you know, everything that's transforming, we're going to keep going back and forth. You don't immediately step into your spiritual soul nature overnight, just like, oh, that's who I am, this is why everything's happened to me that ever has happened to me. No, this takes time, because our spiritual nature is really, really far out and deep and profoundly powerful. It's a big deal. We get to enjoy the transition there, and as we are transitioning there, we go, oh, this is who I am, this is what I want to step into. Never mind, I want to be free. I don't want to be weighed down by the choicelessness of my own spiritual nature and duty. And then we come back, it gets a little overwhelming, a little intense. Oh my goodness, this is unconditional love, this is far out, this defies all logic. Step back into freedom. You know what, I'm just going to play around, I want to go out. And it's okay to go back and forth. This is not good and bad. Oh, you're stunting your growth, oh, you're doing a good job. No, this is a part of the process, and you don't want to beat the shit out of yourself. We want to make sure that we're going at a pace that is nurturing ourselves. We don't want to sacrifice our identity into doing all the freedom loving that everybody else is doing. That's kind of like the contemporary culture that everybody's really excited about, doing whatever the hell we want. Yeah, it's like religious freedom, sexual freedom, all these things. People are getting really excited about that. And that's okay, we can enjoy that, but there is something much more tasty here. And that's going to be found in the choiceless inherent nature that is unconditional love. And that is our deepest soul identity. So although we can go back and forth, and although we can experiment, what is actually fundamentally going on is that all of these changes are getting us to align into that which does not change. All of these changes are getting us to do the attitude shifting we need to step into our fundamental soul identity. And you know, the closer and closer we get to that, we feel more and more secure, and eventually our feet will hit the ground. We will know who we are, and we will just do our thing. And it's not going to be so confusing, so tumultuous, so crazy as it is now. Yeah, so we're kind of drifting around now. We're definitely not landed yet, but this is where we're going, and that's why everything is being tossed and turned around. We're looking for our soul spiritual identity that's going to contribute to this mass movement that is revolutionizing the world. But we do have to kind of look at the pain and the pleasure in life in order to access this deeper spiritual truth. And then, you know, it becomes less and less scary over time. It becomes less and less, I'm afraid of death, I'm afraid of sickness, I'm afraid of losing my lovers, and it becomes much more, I give up, I let go, I am who I am. I'm going to receive the experiences I receive. I'm going to enjoy the presence of those that show up in my life, and they will leave when it is time for them to leave. So that's the best we can do these days with this Pisces energy, is just kind of let ourselves let go, see where things take us. Yes, we're going to start moving forward again this next week as Mercury turns direct, as we have a new moon next week at 0 degrees of Pisces. And then we continue this inward search, establishing a concrete identity that by the end of the year we're going to be much more grounded in and firmly standing upon. That way we can start being much more active and involved with what we actually want to be giving and expressing to the world. and not worried so much about what's coming back to us. Yeah, that's kind of the big key right there. When we align with our soul truth, it's about giving that soul truth, and there is nothing more pleasurable than giving your soul truth. And it doesn't really matter about what's coming back to you, and then we take what's coming back to us less personally, and it's not so much measuring how much we give versus what we receive. It's not about that anymore. We just want to keep giving and giving and giving what makes us feel most complete and whole and meaningful. That is our spiritual truth. That is aligned with our unconditional love and our selfless service that we did come here to distribute, yes. And choicelessly, we're not going to feel totally best until we do that. All right, so the astrology chart is a major map and a major message to us in stepping into the spiritual truth and understanding why these experiences happening to us, why these tragedies, why these wounds are fundamentally a part of our glory, of our gift, leading us into becoming beacons of healing transformation in this world. So all the best to you and your beloveds. Namaste.